Hello everybody, this is Johns Hopkins with Baltimore Heritage, and we're back with another of our 5-minute history videos. And today I'm at Belvedere Square, just off of York Road and just south of Northern Parkway, if you know where that is. That's what we're going to talk about today. Now the Belvedere Square that we know, with Atwater's, soups and sandwiches and all of that, got its start in 1986, but really it can trace its roots back to the 1940s when Hochschild Kohn put one of its first suburban style department stores here. But we're going to jump in, let's jump in. Back to how this area called Goven's got its start as a civic and commercial hub. Now York Road had been a footpath, a trail from Native American peoples for eons, but by about the middle of the 1700s, enough folks of European descent, settlers, were here that York Road became a turnpike. Farmers carrying their goods from northern Maryland and southern Pennsylvania down to Baltimore's markets and to the port and out to the world. By the middle of the 1800s, transportation had improved, including something I think that was called an omnibus, basically a horse-drawn streetcar system, so that in 1874, York Road got what was called the Horse Car Railway. It was becoming, this area was becoming a commuter suburb even back then. By 1900, the area had 5 blacksmiths and 2 carriage shops. After all, we were along a thoroughfare. People's wheels broke and needed to be repaired. And that's when things really began to hop. By the 1930s, land was so valuable, more valuable for real estate than for agricultural purposes. And even during the Great Depression, farms were disappearing, houses were popping up. And then in 1939, we got the great and enormous Senator Theater, all 1,500 seats. That spurred even more development, but also was really a sign of how many people were already living in the area of Goven's back in the 1930s. About 10 years later is when Hochschild Kohn opened up its department store here at the intersection of Belvedere and York, just south of Northern Parkway. We're going to talk about Hochschild Kohn in a second, but then in 1986 is when Belvedere Square, the formation that we kind of know today, got here. But let's turn one click backwards to Hochschild Kohn. It got its start in, I think, 1897 when a German-Jewish immigrant named Max Hochschild teamed up with 2 sons of German-Jewish immigrants, Benno and Louis Kohn. They started their store, Hochschild Kohn, at Howard and Lexington, that famous department store corner. By 1920, it had become the biggest department store in Baltimore. But in the 1930s, it got walloped, maybe more than any other department store in the Great Depression, its profits falling by 50% or more. But after the war, after the Depression, after the war, it bounced back with this new style. It was really a pioneer nationally in this new suburban mall concept, putting department stores out in the suburbs. In 1947, it put a store on Edmondson Avenue. 1948, its store here. It went on to put Hochschild Kohn stores in Herondale Mall and Social Security Mall and the mall in Columbia. By the 1960s, it was so successful that a young investor named Warren Buffett bought shares in Hochschild Kohn, giving it yet another boost. In 1948, its store here was sleek and modern with steel and glass, a curving atrium, and a circular entrance. It was a far cry from the downtown stores. Its 6 floors of kind of packed merchandise. On the top floor, a formal tea room. This was much more casual and light and airy. As things got going here in 1948, other establishments located. We had the Senator already here for about 10 years, but one of those other places was a restaurant called Thompson's Seagirt House. It relocated in 1949 from the waterfront in Canton, serving Maryland seafood specialties, stuffed rockfish and crab cakes, serving them, however, to the likes of Frank Sinatra and Liberace, Johnny Cash and John Denver, all fans of Thompson's Seagirt House. Maybe you were too back then. Another store that located here was Hess's Shoes. Hess Shoes, 1948. It's a sleek, modern design for its building, won an award from the American Institute of Architects, the Baltimore chapter. The architects buffs continue to love it. Back then, the kids loved it because it had a slide that you could zip down getting from the second floor to the first floor. Dog owners loved it because it had this new concept called a doggy bar outside, basically a watering trough. And parents loved it because it had a barber shop inside the store. So you could have some of your kids getting shoes, some of your kids getting a haircut, and the antsy ones running up and down the stairs and down that slide. All right, but back to Belvedere Square. Hochschild Kohn did very well in the beginning for about 20 or 30 years, but by the 1970s and really early 1980s, it was in a downward spiral. That's when a local developer, James Ward, purchased it and turned this area into 100,000 square feet of offices and shopping space. Out went Hochschild Kohn, and it went Pier 1 Imports, if you remember that store, maybe still do remember that store, and upwards of 3 dozen local vendors. Fadley Seafood had a place here. Places like the Coffee Mill, Larry's Ice Cream, and Debbie's Produce all were here. The restaurant chain Chili's built its own store here, later becoming Ryan's Daughter, and I believe is now part of the University of Maryland medical system. And in the early years, this was doing really well for about 10 years. And this is when, like the cat with the proverbial 9 lives, Belvedere Square has had its ups and its downs. By the late 1990s, it was in a downward trend, so much downward that then Mayor Martin O'Malley threatened to condemn it and get the city involved. I don't think he had to do that, but a group of real estate developers jumped in and turned it into this marketplace concept. So you would have stores on the inside, but also activities on the outside. You had new places coming in like Greg's Bagels. Some of us remember Greg's Bagels. That lasted for about 10 years. Then it's changed hands to another group of local developers that continued on with its sort of mixed offices and shops and restaurants. And then another 10 years later, right after COVID, it changed hands again to its current ownership, bringing back some places. Atwater's is still here, but also new places like a new Korean hot pot restaurant, I believe, at the corner. All right, I'm going to wrap up and say that in many ways, Belvedere Square today is a far cry from the carriage repair places and blacksmiths 150 years ago. But in many ways, it's the same place. It is that same hub of commercial activity in Goven's on York Road heading into and out of Baltimore. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.